See there? See there?
So I would like to start with asking both of our guests, but first, Noah, how would Governor Romney handle America's relationship to the volatile and often violent Arab world?
One of the interesting aspects of this has been that the moment Romney made this critique of a very, very weak statement from the embassy in Cairo, he was subjected to this pile-on from reporters who denied his right to criticize the president in a moment when Americans had been killed. And I think, you know, this has been kind of the media narrative for the past couple of days. And I would ask everyone to remember that in 2004 and in 2008, John Kerry and Barack Obama routinely criticized President Bush and then Senator McCain on days when Americans had been killed in wars and using those deaths as part of a political argument about American foreign policy. And that what Romney did and what Romney said is a perfectly legitimate campaign issue, because I think there is a contrast between how Romney would handle the Arab world and how Obama has. Obama has pursued a policy of seeking very friendly relations with regimes that do not share American values. In terms of the revolution in Egypt, he was very quick to ask Hosni Mubarak to step down. And throughout the course when the Muslim Brotherhood was coming to power, Obama and his administration always defended the Muslim Brotherhood and said, this is a democratic movement, we have to respect democratic choices, and in my opinion did not speak clearly enough to indicate to the Muslim Brotherhood that America would tolerate a democratic movement bringing an Islamist party to power, but only so far. I mean, you had Muslim Brotherhood statements questioning their peace treaty with Israel, and there was one where Hillary Clinton was in Cairo, and the foreign minister of Egypt very openly questioned whether Egypt would abide by the treaty, and Hillary Clinton said nothing about it. And in Turkey, you have Erdogan, who has imprisoned a lot of journalists, who has encouraged Islamism, who has pursued a very, very hostile relationship with Israel. And throughout this, President Obama has said nothing in criticism of Erdogan or of the Turkish government. And he has also said nothing, virtually nothing, in criticism of the Palestinians. There have been numerous instances of anti-Semitic incitement, of acts of violence. And it's amazing, but if you look, and maybe you can jog my memory, but I cannot remember a single time in the past 4 years when Barack Obama has criticized the Palestinians. He has criticized the Israelis over and over and over and over again, dozens and dozens of times, in highly public ways. This is an administration, as Obama himself said, as part of his strategy, that he wanted a new beginning with the Arab world, and he went on a sort of a listening tour after he was elected president. He spoke in these countries, and that's fine. He criticized America overseas when he was in Turkey, when he was in France, and in his Cairo speech. And again, we could use the word naive, we could use any number of words, but I just don't get a feeling that that in that part of the world, among the Islamist parties that are ascending in power in the Middle East, that they particularly fear the president. I'm not sure how much they respect him. It's interesting that Mohamed Morsi, the president of Egypt, has not apologized for allowing a mob to attack our embassy. And Barack Obama has not asked for an apology. I find that striking. Mitt Romney, I think, would restore a little bit more moral clarity. He would be a little bit more willing to speak about the way that Turkey and Egypt are sliding in an Islamist direction. He would be a little more clear in articulating American values, and a little more clear in explaining and being a little more unapologetic toward that part of the world about why America has an alliance with Israel, why we defend the values that we have, as opposed to the more theocratic values. And look, it's part of Obama's, it's a strategy that Obama has admitted himself and spoken about quite openly as a strategy of engagement, and part of that engagement is being fairly uncritical. And so I think with Romney, you'd see a little bit of a stronger approach to the Middle East.
Thank you. Alan, would you tackle that question?
Yeah, I think being President of the United States is a great deal about judgment and how you exercise judgment, and when you say things is almost as important as what you say. And I think what happened in the last week and the way that the President of the United States behaved versus the way that Governor Romney reacted is a reflection of the way they use judgment and the way they process information. And so the problem with what Governor Romney did was not that he criticized the U.S. policy, because we're in an election campaign, and I think that would be expected. But I think the mistake that Governor Romney made was the one that President Obama described in his interview the other night. And that is, you don't fire first and aim later when you're dealing with the lives of Americans overseas. And the President duly noted that it's important to kind of have information available to you and make sure that you have some facts before you stick your neck out. Now, it is true that a statement was issued on Twitter from the Egyptian embassy before any lives were taken or the walls were breached. And I urge you to go read that statement. There's no apology in that statement. There is a recognition of the fact that certain members of the Islamic faith were offended by a film which came out of America. I think that's a reflection of American values, because we believe in freedom of speech, but we also believe in religious tolerance. So the fact that we were concerned about that, and that those people who were fearing, frankly, for their lives, wanted to do something to try to calm down that crowd, seemed to be a pretty smart thing to me. Anybody who's watched the President's performance in response to the death of the diplomats over the last several days could not help but feel good about him being the President of the United States and what he stands for. And the way he's responded to that, I think, has been first-rate, non-apologetic, strong for America. But I do think that this whole notion of what it means to be president and whether or not we need to strongly stand up for America or whether or not we're being apologetic misses the point. There is a world out there which is discovering that they don't have to live under dictators anymore. By the way, this grew in large part out of the freedom agenda under President Bush, where we encouraged the Arab masses to take control of their own lives. And it was reflected, for example, in the insistence of the Bush administration that there be free elections in the West Bank in 2006, which resulted in the election of a Hamas government. Not so good for Israel. But you know what? We're here in the United States and we have a lot of power. We are not going to be able to stop 90 million Egyptians who now have the ability to get on the internet, watch Al Jazeera, have cell phones, talk to the outside world, and realize that people all over the world do not have to live under dictatorships as they did under Hosni Mubarak for over 30 years. Whether we like the fact that Hosni Mubarak was somebody who was good at keeping the peace with Israel, or generally a good ally to the United States, that's not going to let the Egyptian people or force the Egyptian people to keep him in power. When somebody sets themselves on fire in Tunisia and it leads to a government being overthrown, we in the United States, unless we're prepared to send in troops to defend dictators in every one of those countries, we're not going to stop that. So the question isn't whether we're going to stand up strongly and tell people what we think or whether or not we're going to apologize. The question is, what are we going to do when faced with a changing world that we can't control by ourselves? And I think what this president has done is to try to have a multifaceted approach. Yes, part of it has been engagement, but unapologetic engagement. And when I said to you a few minutes ago that you need to go home after this discussion and check facts, I defy any of you to find any instance in which the President of the United States has been apologetic about America. It's never happened. It's It's never happened. I read an article today in the Washington Post by Eric Wemble. You can go get it online. That notion that the president has apologized for the United States gets 4 Pinocchios. It gets pants on fire from all the fact checkers. It's just not true. But it's not about whether he apologizes or whether it's drunk. It's about what we do. So part of it's engagement. Part of it is the appropriate use of diplomatic power. Part of it is the use of military strength, as we did in Libya. It's a combination using presidential judgment that makes the difference in these situations. Now, we're not through this yet. It's going to be a very trying time because it's no longer, as I said, a situation where the great powers of the world are going to be able to tell the non-aligned world how to behave successfully. We're going to have to use all elements of American power, soft power, hard power, engagement, diplomacy, all of it, in order to be successful. This president is not somebody who only plays one tune. And so that gives ammunition for his opponents to cherry pick one aspect of his policy, but I think in the end he gets it right. One last comment.
All right, can you...
Yeah, one last comment. On this notion that he doesn't stand up for Israel, I would just advise you to go back and read his comments in Cairo. When in that audience in Cairo, he talked about the United States alliance with Israel, and read his speech before the United Nations in 2011, when in front of the United Nations he stood up unabashedly in favor of Israel.
Thanks, Alan. Noah has
a quick point of clarity about the issue of Obama apologizing for America. After he was elected in 2009, he went on a foreign tour, which took him to France, Turkey, Cairo, Trinidad and Tobago, and then back to CIA headquarters in America. And over the course of 2 months, he gave a number of speeches. 4 of them were overseas, and they contained criticisms of America and the way America had behaved in the past. He didn't say literally, I am sorry for America or I apologize for America, but he went overseas, and as part of this engagement strategy, he criticized his predecessor. He criticized America's response to the 9/11 terror attacks. He went to CIA headquarters and talked about how we violated our ideals and values. You can call that an apology. I would call that apologizing for America. I mean, you can call it weird, but that was part of, as a factual matter. I mean, that is, you can go. There's a website called the Free Beacon, and they did a post recently called 5 times Obama apologized for America. And they have the video clips right there. You can go and watch them and call it whatever you want. But that's what happened. I would actually agree with the spirit of this, which is that the Middle East, in particular the Arab world, is very, very challenging. There is not really that much good stuff that you can get out of it. There's nothing in particular, I think, that the American president can do decisively one way or the other to dramatically influence events. There was nothing that, there was no statement from President Obama or any president that would have kept Hosni Mubarak in power. But the response, what I find troubling and what I think a lot of people find troubling is that the response to the rise of Islamism is that there is not much of a pushback. I mean, Morsi, the new president of Egypt, is a 9/11 truther who thinks the Jews did 9/11. He says this openly. And it would be nice to see, President Obama making a little bit more of an issue of things like that, a little bit more of an issue of the way that he has spoken openly about challenging the peace treaty with Israel, the way that he simply refuses to apologize for what just happened at our embassy there. And instead what you hear is that the United States is going to relieve $1 billion of Egypt's debt. And the United States is not even going to question whether we're going to threaten their foreign aid over these things. I just find that there's not much of a pushback from Obama on a lot of these things, and that's what's troubling.